Cole turned to wipe grease from his hands and glanced around his repair shop on Station Echo 7. The place wasn't much to look at, just a converted storage bay with workbenches covered in tools, spare parts hanging from magnetic strips on the walls, and the perpetual smell of metal and solvent in the air. But it was his, and he'd built a decent reputation over the past 3 years fixing just about anything that broke. Station Echo 7 sat at the edge of known space, a neutral trading post where species from across the galaxy came to do business away from politics and regulations of their home worlds. Cole had seen aliens of every shape and size walk through his door. Six-legged Venlari merchants haggling over plasma core repairs. Torthin navigators needing their star-mapping equipment recalibrated. Even a crystalline engineer once, though that crystalline being had mostly just observed him work with what he assumed was curiosity. The afternoon shift was usually quiet, which suited Cole just fine. He'd been working on a busted environmental regulator for one of the station's hydroponic farms, and the delicate circuitry required concentration. The soft hum of the station's life support systems and the occasional announcement over the intercom created a comfortable background rhythm to his work. That's when he heard it, a small, hiccuping sound that made him look up from his workbench. A child stood in his doorway. At least, Cole assumed it was a child, though he'd never seen a draconian up close before. The young creature stood maybe 3 feet tall, covered in silver-blue scales that caught the fluorescent lighting. Small wing buds protruded from their back, not yet developed enough for flight. Their eyes were large and golden, currently brimming with tears that traced down scaled cheeks. In their small clawed hands, they clutched pieces of something broken, fragments of metal and crystal that glinted even in their shattered state. Cole set down his tools immediately and walked over, kneeling to get on eye level with the child. "Hey there, what's wrong?" The hatchling sniffled, struggling with Galactic Common in a way that suggested they were still learning. "Broken, my music box, broken." Each word came out between small sobs. Cole glanced past the child briefly and noticed something odd. 3 security drones hovered outside his shop, the kind usually reserved for diplomatic escorts or high-value cargo transfers. That was unusual for a random kid visiting a repair shop, but he pushed the thought aside. Whatever was going on with security, this child needed help right now. "Can I see it?" Cole asked gently, holding out his hands. The hatchling hesitated, then carefully placed the broken pieces into Cole's palms like they were offering up something precious and sacred. And maybe they were. The way the child looked at those fragments suggested this wasn't just any toy. Cole moved to his workbench and activated the overhead magnification lamp, spreading the pieces out carefully. What he saw made him whistle low under his breath. The craftsmanship was incredible, unlike anything he'd encountered before. The base appeared to be some kind of crystalline composite that probably sang with harmonic resonance when intact. The gears, he counted at least 20 visible fragments, weren't standard mechanical components. They seemed to be grown rather than manufactured, with organic-looking patterns etched into metal that shifted colors in the light. "This is beautiful work," Cole said honestly, aware the child had followed him and was watching anxiously. "Can you tell me what happened?" The hatchling's lip trembled. "I dropped it. I was showing my friend, and I dropped it, and now it won't play anymore." Fresh tears welled up. "My parent gave it to me before they left for the long journey. They said whenever I missed them, I should play it and remember they are thinking of me too. But now it's broken and they are so far away and I can't." The words dissolved into crying. Cole felt his chest tighten. He'd been that kid once, maybe not with something this elaborate, but he remembered being 8 years old when his dad's old pocket watch had stopped working. His father had been deployed overseas, and that watch had been Cole's connection to him. He'd carried the broken thing around for weeks until his dad came home and fixed it together with him, showing him how the gears and springs worked. "Listen," Cole said, making his voice warm and reassuring. "I'm going to do everything I can to fix this, okay? I can't promise anything because this is really advanced technology, but I promise I'll try my absolute best. Does that sound fair?" The hatchling wiped their eyes with the back of their clawed hand and nodded, hope flickering back to life in those golden eyes. "What's your name?" Cole asked. "Kaida," the child said quietly. "All right, Kaida. I'm Cole. Now, I'm going to need some time to figure out how all these pieces fit together and what I'll need to repair them. Can you come back tomorrow afternoon? I should know more by then." Kaida nodded seriously, treating his words with the gravity of a solemn oath. "You promise you'll try." "I promise I'll try," Cole confirmed. The child left with visible reluctance, glancing back 3 times before finally disappearing down the station corridor. Those security drones followed at a discreet distance, which Cole filed away as another oddity to wonder about later. He turned back to the scattered pieces on his workbench and let out a long breath. What had he just gotten himself into? This technology was easily centuries beyond human capability. But he'd made a promise to a heartbroken kid, and Cole Turner didn't break promises. He pulled up a chair, activated his scanning equipment, and got to work. Outside his shop, hidden in the security feed that Kaidar's guard were transmitting, the Dragon Emperor watched the human mechanic begin an impossible task. The Emperor's expression revealed nothing as he observed, but his attention never wavered. This test had begun, and the fate of an entire species might rest on what happened in that small repair shop over the coming days. Cole stared at the fragments spread across his workbench until his eyes blurred. He'd been at it for 4 hours straight, and the more he examined the music box, the more impossible the repair seemed. The crystalline gears weren't just decorative. They were functional components that somehow stored and transmitted sound through molecular vibration. The circuitry was so fine he could barely see it even under magnification, networks of conductive pathways that looked more like living neural tissue than anything manufactured. He rubbed his face and reached for his cold coffee, grimacing at the taste. Station Echo 7 had cycled into its night mode, the lighting dimmed to simulate planetary rhythms. Most shops had closed hours ago, but Cole's workbench lamp created a small island of brightness in the darkened station corridor. "This is insane," he muttered to himself, picking up one of the larger gear fragments. The material felt warm to the touch, almost alive. When he held it up to his ear, he could swear he heard a faint humming, like the ghost of the melody it used to produce. Any reasonable person would have told Kaidao it couldn't be fixed. The technology gap was just too vast. It would be like asking someone from the 1800s to repair a smartphone with nothing but a hammer and some wire. But Cole kept seeing those golden eyes brimming with tears, kept hearing the tremor in that small voice talking about a parent far away on a long journey. He set down the coffee and pulled up his reference database, scrolling through technical specifications for every alien technology he'd encountered. Nothing matched. The Venlari used plasma-based systems. The Torthians favored biological computing. The Crystallines work with living crystal, but even their technology didn't operate on these principles. Cole leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes when you couldn't go forward with knowledge, you had to go sideways with creativity. He'd learned that growing up in his father's garage, watching the old man coax broken engines back to life with nothing but patience and improvisation. "All right," he said to the empty shop. "Let's think about what I do know." He knew the basic principles of how music boxes worked, a cylinder with pins that plucked tuned tines to create melodies. This alien version was infinitely more complex, but maybe the core concept was similar. The crystalline gears probably resonated at specific frequencies. The circuitry might amplify and modulate those frequencies. If he could figure out the pattern, maybe he could rebuild the mechanism using materials he actually had access to. Cole spent the next 3 hours creating a detailed map of every fragment, photographing each piece from multiple angles and noting every mark, every junction point, every stress fracture. It was painstaking work that made his neck ache and his eyes burn, but slowly a picture began to emerge. He could see how the gears had interlocked, how the energy had flowed through the system. Around midnight, he had a breakthrough. One of his scanning tools detected residual harmonic patterns in the crystal fragments, like echoes of the frequencies they used to produce. If he could measure those patterns, he might be able to tune replacement components to match. The problem was he didn't have replacement components. Nothing in his shop came close to the sophistication of these crystalline gears. But he did have something, a box of synthetic crystal oscillators he'd salvaged from a broken Terran Comma race 6 months ago. They weren't designed for this purpose, but crystal was crystal. With enough modification, maybe he could make them work. Cole pulled out his fabrication tools and got to work. He'd have to handcraft each gear, shaping the crystal fragments with laser precision and hoping he could get the resonant frequencies close enough. It was like trying to tune a piano by ear when you'd never heard music before, but it was the only shot he had. The station's artificial morning arrived, and Cole barely noticed. His hands moved with steady precision, cutting and polishing crystal, testing frequencies, adjusting and readjusting. Fabricated gears began to accumulate on his workbench, rough approximations of the originals, but functional. At least, he hoped they were functional. Around mid-morning, his shop door chimed. Cole looked up to find Kaidar standing there, those golden eyes wide with hope and anxiety. "Is it fixed?" the hatchling asked quietly. Cole smiled despite his exhaustion. "Not yet, but I'm making progress. Want to see what I'm doing?" Kaidar approached the workbench cautiously, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter everything. Cole pulled over a stool and helped the child climb up. "See these pieces?" Cole pointed to the crystalline gears he'd been fabricating. "The original ones were broken too badly to repair, so I'm making new ones. These crystals vibrate at specific frequencies. Think of it like they're singing very quiet songs. When all the gears sing together in the right pattern, they create the music your parent recorded into the box." "But how do you know which songs they should sing?" Kaidar asked, genuinely curious now. "That's the tricky part," Cole admitted. "I'm using the scanner to listen to the echoes left in the broken pieces. It's like they remember the music they used to make. Then I tune each new gear to match those echoes." Kaidar watched in fascination as Cole demonstrated, adjusting a crystal oscillator until it produced a clear tone. The hatchling's tail swished back and forth. Excitement. Cole guessed, though he wasn't familiar enough with draconian body language to be sure. "Can I help?" Kaidar asked. Cole considered. "Actually, yeah. See this gauge here? I need you to watch it and tell me when the needle reaches the green zone while I adjust this gear. Can you do that?" Kaidar nodded seriously, eyes fixed on the gauge with intense concentration. They worked together for the next 20 minutes, Cole making micro-adjustments while Kaidar called out readings. When they finally got the gear tuned properly, Kaidar's face lit up with pride. "We did it!" the hatchling exclaimed. "We did," Cole agreed, feeling some of his exhaustion fade at the child's joy. "That's one gear down, 19 to go." Kaidar's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "That's a lot." "It is," Cole said honestly. "But every big repair is just a bunch of small repairs put together. We just take it one piece at a time." The hatchling left eventually, promising to return the next day. Cole waved goodbye and noticed those security drones still hovering at a distance. He wondered again who this kid's parent was to warrant that kind of protection, but mostly he was just tired. He allowed himself 4 hours of sleep in the small room behind his shop, then got back to work. The next 2 days blurred together, fabricating gears, tuning frequencies, testing connections. His hands developed small cuts from handling the crystal, and his eyes ached from the magnification work. But he kept going. Kaidar visited every afternoon like clockwork, and Cole always stopped to show them progress, to teach them something about mechanics or frequency or patience. The child's laughter became the highlight of his day, a reminder why he was putting himself through this impossible task. What Cole didn't know was that every moment was being watched. Light years away, in a throne room that could have swallowed Station Echo 7 whole, the Dragon Emperor sat motionless before holographic displays. His advisors whispered concerns about the test taking too long, about needing to move on to other matters. The Emperor silenced them with a gesture, his ancient eyes never leaving the human mechanic who worked through exhaustion for no reward except a child's smile. Cole's hands trembled slightly as he positioned the final gear into place. 5 days of barely sleeping, living on coffee and protein bars, and working until his vision blurred had led to this moment. The music box sat reassembled on his workbench, looking almost whole again. Almost. The crystalline gears he'd fabricated by hand weren't quite as elegant as the originals, and the housing had required careful soldering where the cracks had been too severe to simply bond. But it was together. The real question was whether it would actually work. He'd tested each component individually, tuned every gear to match the harmonic echoes he detected in the broken fragments, and triple-checked every connection. But a music box wasn't just a collection of parts. It was a symphony of components working together. One gear out of tune, one frequency slightly off, and the whole thing would produce nothing but noise. Always, nothing at all. Cole glanced at the chronometer on his wall. Kaidar would arrive in about 20 minutes for the daily progress check. Part of him wanted to test it now, to know before the child got there whether his 5 days of work had been for nothing. But another part of him felt like Kaidar deserved to be there for this moment, regardless of the outcome. He spent the remaining time cleaning up his workspace, gathering the tools and putting away the spare parts. His shop looked like a disaster zone, fabrication equipment scattered everywhere, reference materials pulled up on every available screen, empty coffee cups creating a small mountain in the corner. He'd deal with that later. The door chimed, and Kaidar rushed in with the enthusiasm Cole had come to expect. The Hatchling's guardian, a serious-looking draconian warrior who never spoke but always maintained a respectful distance, waited outside as usual. Those security drones still hovered nearby, an oddity Cole had stopped questioning days ago. "Is today the day?" Kaidar asked breathlessly, eyes immediately finding the assembled music box on the workbench. "I think it might be," Cole said, feeling his heart rate pick up. "But I need to tell you something first, okay? I did everything I could, and I'm pretty sure I got it right, but this technology is way beyond anything humans normally work with. If it doesn't play, or if it sounds wrong, I want you to know I really did try my best." Kaidar nodded solemnly, climbing onto the stool beside his workbench. "I know you tried. I watched you." Cole took a deep breath and picked up the music box. The winding mechanism was on the base, one of the few components that had survived intact. He'd tested it mechanically and knew it worked, but he'd never activated it with all the gears in place. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, and began to wind the mechanism. The key turned smoothly, clicking with each rotation. Cole could feel tension building in the internal spring, energy storing itself for release. He wound it for about 30 seconds, then set the box gently on the workbench and stepped back. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the first gear began to turn, and the workshop filled with sound. It wasn't just music, it was something beyond music. Harmonics layered over harmonics, creating melodies that seemed to exist in dimensions Cole couldn't quite perceive. The crystalline gears sang together, each frequency blending with the others to produce something hauntingly beautiful. The sound made his chest ache with emotions he couldn't name, joy and sorrow mixed together, comfort and longing intertwined. Cole had heard music from dozens of alien cultures, but nothing like this. The melody rose and fell like breathing, like a heartbeat, like a lullaby sung across the vastness of space. He could almost see why Kaidar's parent had chosen this as a gift. It felt like love made audible, like someone saying, "I'm with you even when I'm far away," in a language older than words. He looked over at Kaidar and saw tears streaming down the hatchling scaled cheeks, but these weren't tears of sadness. The child's face radiated pure joy, eyes closed, swaying slightly to the melody. Small clawed hands were pressed against their chest, right over where Cole assumed their heart was. The music played for nearly 3 minutes before the spring wound down and the melody faded into silence. The last note seemed to hang in the air for a moment, reluctant to disappear completely. Kaidar's eyes opened slowly, like someone waking from a beautiful dream. For several seconds, the hatchling just stared at the music box, then looked up at Cole with an expression of such profound gratitude that it made the mechanic's throat tighten. "You fixed it," Kaidar whispered. "You really fixed it." Before Cole could respond, the child launched off a stool and tackle-hugged him with enough force to nearly knock him over. Cole caught himself against the workbench, laughing, and steadied them both. "Easy there," he said, patting the hatchling's back awkwardly. "I'm glad it worked." Kaidar pulled back, wiping their eyes. "It sounds exactly right. Exactly like I remember. How did you do it?" "A lot of coffee and stubbornness," Cole joked, then added more seriously, "and because I wanted to help. Some things are worth the effort, you know?" He picked up the music box and showed Kaidar how to wind it properly, explaining which parts were still delicate despite the repair. "See this gear here? It's not quite as strong as the original, so you'll want to be careful not to overwind it. Just turn the key until you feel resistance, then stop, and try to keep it somewhere stable where it won't get knocked around." Kaidar nodded along, absorbing every instruction with the same serious concentration they'd shown throughout the week. When Cole finished, the hatchling carefully took the music box, cradling it like the treasure it was. "How much do I owe you?" Kaidar asked, suddenly looking worried. "I have my allowance saved, but I don't know if it's enough for something this important." Cole waved the question away. "Nothing. It was my pleasure to fix it." "Nothing." Kaidar's eyes went wide. "But you worked so hard. You stayed up late every night. I saw the lights in your shop when I walked past with my guardian. Sometimes the best payment is just knowing you helped someone, Cole said simply. Besides, you helped too, remember? You were my assistant. Kaida beamed at that, standing a little taller. Then the hatchling's expression shifted to something more thoughtful. My parent arrives at the station today. They finished their long journey early. Would you like to meet them? I want to show them what you did. Cole glanced around his disaster of a workshop and grimaced. I'm not really prepared for company, and I probably look like I haven't slept in a week, because I haven't, but sure, I'd like to meet them. He figured Kaida's parent was probably some kind of merchant or maybe a mid-level diplomat, given the security presence. Someone with enough status to warrant protection, but not so important that they'd be too busy to visit a random repair shop. Maybe they'd be grateful enough to send some business his way, or at least spread word that the human mechanic on Station Echo 7 was worth trusting with delicate repairs. They'll be here in about an hour, Kaida said excitedly. I need to go tell them you fixed it. Thank you, Cole. Thank you so much. The hatchling rushed out, clutching the music box carefully, the guardian falling into step behind them. Those security drone followed as always, and Cole watched them go with a slight smile on his exhausted face. An hour. That gave him time to clean up a bit, maybe make himself look slightly less like someone who'd been living in their workshop for 5 days straight. He started gathering empty coffee cups, thinking about how nice it would be to meet the parent of such a sweet kid. He had no idea that half the station was about to go into lockdown, or that diplomatic protocols were being activated across multiple sectors, or that the most powerful being in 3-star systems was about to walk through his door. Cole managed to clear most of the coffee cups and get the worst of the clutter off his workbenches before he heard the commotion outside. At first, it was just distant sounds, boots marching in synchronized steps, the low hum of multiple security drones, voices speaking in clipped, official tones. He figured some dignitary was passing through the station, maybe heading to one of the conference rooms in the diplomatic sector. Then the footsteps got closer, and closer. Cole glanced out his shop window and felt his stomach drop. The entire corridor had been cleared of foot traffic. Station security personnel stood at attention every 10 feet, and there had to be at least 30 armed draconian guards in formation, their armor gleaming under the station lights. More security drones than he could count hovered in synchronized patterns, and they were all heading straight toward his shop. Oh no, Cole muttered, his mind racing. Had he somehow broken an interstellar law by repairing the music box? Was the technology classified? He'd heard stories about mechanics getting arrested for working on restricted equipment, but Kaida had brought it to him freely. Surely that meant it was okay to fix, right? Station Administrator Chen appeared in his doorway, the normally composed man looking frazzled and slightly panicked. Turner, why didn't you tell me you were working on Imperial property? I would have. We could have prepared. This is highly irregular. Imperial what? Cole asked, genuinely confused. I just fixed a kid's music box. Chen stared at him like he'd grown a second head. That kid is... He cut himself off as the sound of armored footsteps grew louder. Just try not to cause an interstellar incident, please. And for God's sake, bow when he enters. Before Cole could ask who he was, Chen disappeared back into the corridor. Cole stood frozen in his workshop, mind spinning, as a footstep stopped right outside his door. The draconian guards entered first, 4 of them taking positions at the corners of his small shop. They were massive, easily 7 feet tall, their armor covered in markings that probably indicated rank and honors. Each carried weapons that looked like they could vaporize his entire shop with a single shot. Then Kaida bounced in, the music box clutched carefully in their arms, face glowing with excitement. Cole, my parent is here. I told them everything. And then the Dragon Emperor walked through the door. Cole knew it was the Emperor immediately, even though he'd never seen a draconian of such high rank before. The being had to duck to fit through the doorway, easily 8 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted between deep crimson and gold depending on the light. The armor he wore wasn't just protective gear. It was art, each plate etched with symbol that seemed to move and breathe. A crown of what looked like crystallized fire rested on his head, and his eyes were ancient, holding a weight of centuries that made Cole feel like an insect under microscope. The most powerful being in 3 sectors had just entered his tiny repair shop on the edge of nowhere. Cole's knees wanted to buckle. His mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed at him to grovel, to apologize for whatever he'd done wrong. But he couldn't make his body move. He just stood there beside his cluttered workbench, probably looking like an idiot, while the Dragon Emperor examined the space with those calculating ancient eyes. The Emperor's gaze swept over the workshop, the tools hanging on magnetic strips, the spare parts organized in bins, the reference materials still pulled up on screens, the coffee stain on the floor that Cole had never quite managed to clean properly. Finally, those eyes settled on Cole himself, and the mechanic felt like every thought he'd ever had was being read and catalogued. "You are the one called Cole Turner," the Emperor said. It wasn't a question. His voice was deep and resonant, the kind that probably carried across battlefields and throne rooms. In Cole's small shop, it seemed to make the very air vibrate. "Yes, Your Majesty," Cole managed, his voice coming out steadier than he felt. I fixed Kaida's music box. I hope that was okay. They seemed really upset, and I just wanted to help." The Emperor moved closer, each step deliberate and measured. He was so tall that Cole had to crane his neck back to maintain eye contact. The guards tensed slightly, hands moving closer to their weapons, but the Emperor raised one clawed hand and they relaxed fractionally. The Emperor knelt down, slowly and deliberately, until he was at Cole's eye level. This close, Cole could see the intricate patterns in the scales, the flecks of gold in those ancient eyes, the careful control in every movement. This was a being who could probably tear apart a starship with his bare hands, but chose to make himself less threatening for a conversation with a human mechanic. "Why?" the Emperor asked simply. Cole blinked. "Why what, Your Majesty? Why did you spend 5 days repairing a stranger's possession, expecting no payment, no recognition, no reward? My attendants informed me you refused compensation from my child." Cole glanced at Kaida, who watched the exchange with rapt attention, then back to the Emperor. His mind raced, trying to figure out what answer wouldn't get him thrown in some alien prison. But something about those ancient eyes suggested that lying would be worse than any truth he could offer. Because it mattered to them, Cole said finally, gesturing toward Kaida. "They came into my shop crying, holding pieces of something their parent had given them before a long journey. I've been that kid, not with anything this fancy, but I know what it's like to have something break that connects you to someone you miss." He took a breath. "And I don't know. Sometimes the right thing to do is just the right thing to do. They needed help. I could help. The rest didn't seem important." The Emperor's expression remained unreadable. The silence stretched for several heartbeats, and Cole wondered if he'd said something terribly wrong. "I have been watching you since the first day," the Emperor said finally, and Cole felt his blood run cold. "My child's visit was not coincidence. It was a test." "A test?" Cole repeated weakly. "The Draconian sovereignty has been observing humanity, deciding whether your species merits diplomatic contact or should be classified as too primitive for engagement. We have administered similar tests to dozens of species across the galaxy, placing a member of our royal family in a vulnerable position, observing how they are treated when there is no benefit to kindness, no audience to impress, no authority to enforce decency." Cole felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "You've been testing humanity, through me." "Through various humans across your colonies and stations," the Emperor confirmed. "Merchants who encountered draconian travelers in need. Scientists who met researchers requesting assistance. Soldiers who found injured civilians. The vast majority failed. They saw opportunity for exploitation, or they provided minimal help expecting maximum reward, or they simply ignored the need entirely." The Emperor's gaze intensified. "You are the only one who passed." "I just fixed a music box," Cole said, still trying to process this information. "That's all I did." "You spent 5 days on an impossible repair for no reward. You treated my child with patience and kindness, teaching them while you worked. You refused payment when the task was complete. And when offered the chance to meet their parent, when you could have prepared, could have made demands, could have positioned yourself for advantage, you simply agreed because it seemed like a decent thing to do." The Emperor stood, towering over Cole once more. These actions reveal character more clearly than any diplomatic negotiation or military demonstration ever could. Cole's mind was reeling. The fate of humanity had been riding on whether he fixed a kid's toy? That seemed insane. But looking at the Emperor's serious expression, at the guard standing at attention, at Administrator Chen visible through the window looking like he might pass out from stress, Cole realized this was completely real. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. The Emperor's expression shifted slightly, not quite a smile, but something that suggested approval. "Now, we discuss the future." The Emperor gestured toward Cole's small office area, where a battered desk and two mismatched chairs sat surrounded by filing cabinets full of repaired documentation. It was absurd. The most powerful being in 3 sectors wanting to have a conversation in a space barely big enough for 2 people. But the guards moved efficiently, checking the room and then taking positions outside to give them privacy. Kaidar settled onto a workbench, swinging their legs and clutching the music box, clearly thrilled to witness whatever was about to happen. Cole sat down carefully, and the Emperor took the other chair. It creaked ominously under his weight, and Cole sent up a silent prayer that it wouldn't collapse and somehow turn this into an even more mortifying situation. "I need you to understand what was at stake," the Emperor began, his voice quieter now but no less intense. "The draconian sovereignty spans hundreds of worlds, and we have encountered thousands of species in our expansion across the galaxy. We have learned, through considerable pain and loss, that technological advancement means nothing without moral foundation. A species can master faster than light travel, can build weapons that crack planets, can manipulate the very fabric of space, and still be fundamentally cruel, fundamentally selfish, fundamentally destructive." Cole nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak yet. "My people value honor above all else," the Emperor continued. "Loyalty to one's word. Compassion for those weaker than oneself. The courage to do what is right even when no one is watching, even when there is no reward, even when it costs you something precious. These are the qualities that determine whether a species becomes our ally or our concern. And you test for these qualities by..." Cole gestured vaguely, "having your kid go around with broken toys." Something that might have been amusement flickered in the Emperor's eyes. "Among other scenarios, yes, we observe species in moments of truth, when they believe no one of importance is watching, when there is no advantage to kindness. That is when true character reveals itself. Official diplomatic channels tell us nothing. Any species can put on a performance when they know they are being evaluated. But how do they treat a lost child? An injured stranger? Someone who can offer them nothing in return?" Cole thought about the past 5 days from this new perspective. Every moment he'd spent fixing that music box, every time he'd stopped his work to teach Kaidar something, every decision to refuse payment. All of it had been watched and judged. The thought should have made him angry, but instead he just felt exhausted. "How many humans did you test?" he asked. 17, across your various colonies and stations, over the course of 6 months. The Emperor's expression grew somber. Most failed immediately. They saw vulnerable draconians and saw opportunity. Prices were inflated. Services were denied unless payment was provided upfront. Assistance was given grudgingly and with minimal effort. 3 of your kind even attempted to harm or kidnap the young draconians placed in their path, believing them to be unprotected. Cole felt sick. "I'm sorry. Not all humans are like that." "Clearly not, or you would not be here," the Emperor said. "But you must understand why we were concerned. Humanity is young, aggressive, expansionist. You spread across space with remarkable speed, your technology advancing faster than your wisdom. Without intervention, you could become a threat, or you could become something far more valuable. We needed to know which path you would take. And I decided that by fixing a music box," Cole said, still struggling to wrap his head around it. "You decided it by revealing who you are when you think no one important is watching," the Emperor corrected. "You worked yourself to exhaustion for 5 days on an impossible task, not because you had to, but because you gave your word to a heartbroken child. You refused payment because the act itself was a point. You taught while you worked, showing patience and kindness to a young being from a species you barely understood. And when offered the chance to meet their parent, you asked for no special treatment, no reward, no recognition. You simply wanted to meet the parent of a nice kid." Cole looked down at his hands, at the small cut from working with crystal, at the grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. "I'm just a mechanic. I fix things. That's what I do." "Precisely," the Emperor said, and now there was definitely approval in his tone. You are exactly what you appear to be. No pretense, no performance, no hidden agenda. This is why I am prepared to recommend to the Sovereignty Council that humanity be welcomed into diplomatic relations with our empire. The words hung in the air for a moment before their full meaning hit Cole like a physical blow. You're saying, because I fixed a music box, all of humanity gets to join your alliance. I am saying that your actions demonstrated the potential within your species. One person cannot speak for billions, but one person can reveal what is possible when your kind chooses compassion over exploitation, effort over apathy, decency over advantage. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Cole Turner, why do you think humans deserve a place among the galactic community? It was a test. Cole realized. Maybe the final one. He thought carefully before answering. I don't know if we deserve it, he said honestly. You said 17 humans were tested and only I passed. That's not great odds. Humanity has done terrible things. To each other, to our own planet, probably to some of the aliens we've met out here. We're messy and violent, and we make mistakes constantly. He paused. But we're also capable of better. We can learn. We can choose to be kind even when it's hard. We can look at a crying kid, any kid, from any species, and decide that helping them matters more than whatever else we had planned. I think that potential counts for something. I think it's worth giving us a chance. The Emperor studied him for a long moment, those ancient eyes seeing everything. Then he stood, and Cole scrambled to his feet as well. The Draconian sovereignty will extend diplomatic recognition to humanity, the Emperor announced formally. Station Echo 7 will be designated as a permanent embassy, the first point of ongoing contact between our peoples. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense treaties will be negotiated in the coming months. Cole's mind reeled. His little repair shop on a forgotten station at the edge of space was about to become the center of human-alien relations. Your Majesty, that's incredible, but I'm not a diplomat. I don't know anything about treaties or negotiations which is precisely why I am also offering you a position as special advisor on human-draconian relations, the Emperor interrupted. You would work directly with my diplomatic corps, helping us understand human culture and values from a perspective of someone who embodies those values naturally. It was an honor beyond anything Cole had ever imagined, a position of real power and influence, a chance to shape the future of his entire species. Any sane person would have accepted immediately. I appreciate that, Your Majesty, more than I can say, Cole said slowly, but I'm going to have to decline. The guards outside tensed visibly. Even Kaidar looked shocked. The Emperor's expression remained neutral, but Cole could sense surprise beneath it. May I ask why? The Emperor said carefully. Because I'm a mechanic, Cole said simply. I like fixing things. I like taking something broken and making it work again. I like the satisfaction of solving a problem with my hands, and I like when people bring me their broken stuff because they trust me to help them. That's who I am. If I took some fancy advisor position, I'd stop being the person you just said represented the best of humanity. I'd be pretending to be something I'm not. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then the Emperor did something Cole never expected. He laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the walls, full of genuine amusement and what might have been respect. You continue to surprise me, Cole Turner, the Emperor said, still smiling. You are offered power and prestige, and you turn it down because it would change who you are. This, perhaps more than anything else, confirms that we made the right choice. He placed one massive clawed hand on Cole's shoulder, the gesture surprisingly gentle. Very well. You shall remain exactly what you are, a mechanic on Station Echo 7. But know that your repair shop sits at the heart of something larger now. Humans and Draconians will meet here, trade here, learn about each other here. And it all began because you kept your word to a child. Over the next hour, the Emperor explained what would happen next. Diplomatic teams would arrive within the week. Station Echo 7 would receive massive upgrade to accommodate the new embassy status. Human and Draconian representatives would begin negotiations on everything from trade routes to cultural exchange programs. The news was already spreading across human space, transmitted faster than light to every colony, every station, every ship. Humanity's entire diplomatic future had been secured by a mechanic who fixed a child's toy. When the Emperor finally prepared to leave, Kaidar rushed over and hugged Cole one more time. "Will you still fix things even when the station gets bigger?" the hatchling asked worriedly. "Always," Cole promised. "That's what I do." The Imperial procession departed with the same formality it had arrived with, leaving Cole standing in his workshop surrounded by tools and spare parts and the comfortable familiarity of his life's work. His communication console was already blinking with hundreds of messages, news agencies, human government officials, people congratulating or questioning or demanding interviews. Cole ignored all of it. He had 3 gravity regulators that still needed repair, a Venlori merchant expecting her plasma coils back by tomorrow, and a Torthian navigation system that was making a noise it definitely shouldn't be making. He picked up his tools and got back to work. Outside, through the station windows, ships were already arriving, diplomatic vessels, news crews, traders hoping to be first in line for the new market opportunities. Station Echo 7 would never be quiet again, would never be just a forgotten outpost at the edge of nowhere. But in his small repair shop, Cole Turner was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do, fixing broken things and making people happy, one repair at a time. The music box sat on a shelf now, in Kaidar's quarters somewhere in the Imperial ship, playing its beautiful melody whenever the hatchling missed their parent. And every time it played, it was a reminder that the smallest act of kindness can echo across the stars, that compassion matters more than power, and that sometimes the most important thing one person can do is simply keep their word to a child. That was the story of how a mechanic changed everything. Not through grand gestures or heroic deeds, but through simple decency, honest work, and the belief that helping others mattered more than personal gain. And in the end, that made all the difference.